What is going on, guys? I am Paul Ryan, your host of the Not ATB Fantasy Show. If you're new to the show, thank you for joining us. And to our regular listeners, welcome back. Unfortunately, Dave couldn't be here tonight, but make sure to give him a follow on X at Pigskin Papers. You can find me on X at Paul_Ryan15. You know, there's not too much going on in the NFL, but with training camp less than a month away, what better time than now to get an early edge on your league mates? Every division in the NFL has players we want, players we don't, and players we need. Tonight, we'll be discussing the AFC East, and helping me break down and evaluate that division is host of the Dynasty Evaluation Show. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome John McGlynn to the show. John, how are you?
I am doing absolutely fantastic. AFC East is kind of my, I'm from Chicago. I'm a Bears fan just by, life, nature, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
But the Bears just piss me off when the owners are gone and there's new fresh blood in the team. I think it'll be even better. But the Dolphins were always my favorite team because of Dan Marino, and now I just can't stand Tua. I don't like the Dolphins are just a funnel of two players that just score, and the rest of the team is kind of left behind on offense anyway. And I've become a Josh Allen fan now. As growing up as a Dolphins fan, I had nothing but Dolphin stuff: jackets, coats, hats. In fourth grade, I got my first Dolphins, the silk starter jacket, the teal one. I was absolutely ecstatic to be a Dolphins fan. My kids are both Dolphins fan now, and now Josh Allen comes along. And I'm like, dude, this is like Dan Marino with legs now. This is absolutely fantastic. He's my favorite player now, and my kids are calling me a traitor, but I just love, you like who you like. I don't like when you get in so many fantasy football leagues, you don't like teams anymore. You start liking players. I don't want to be like a big Dolphins fan and then rooting for Tom Brady to throw 5 touchdowns against my Dolphins, shit like that. You can't be a team of the NFL anymore. Plus, I grew up before free agency was a thing, and guys stuck around for their entire career in the same team. That's different now. You're lucky to have somebody for 3 or 4 years on the team nowadays before he gets traded or free agency or some other stuff like that. So it's kind of like, man, I don't want to buy jerseys anymore and go through this crap where I buy a brand new, let's just say Ramondre Stevenson jersey. Luckily, he got re-signed, but if he didn't, what would I do? He's on Dallas next year or something else like that. Those days are gone. I'm not a jersey guy to begin with. Thank God I'm not, because I see people having garage sales selling their old jerseys for $5 a piece for the last, 40 people they bought. It's when you paid $100 for them or $40 online from someplace overseas, whatever. But I'm more of a dynasty guy than anything. But the AFC East is definitely my brother's a Jets fan. I think just out of spite of me being a Dolphins fan. So the Jets have and the Patriots. Everybody hates the Patriots. I mean, the entire league hates it. Every fan of the NFL kind of hates the Patriots. So it's easy team to hate. So this is a great division for me to talk about. Thanks for having me on to talk about the AFC East.
Absolutely, John. I can't thank you enough for sharing your time. I wasn't that excited about talking about this division, but now hearing all these personal ties that you have with it, man, I'm a little bit more excited about some of these players. And just for tonight's discussion, before we get into it, though, where can we find you on X?
John McGlynn 75 is my Twitter, my X. So I used to be a Facebook guy my whole life, and my neighbor Joe Castleman was like, "You got to get on his Twitter. It's like you can get all fantasy football stuff on there." I'm like, "I'll give it a try." I tried it. I just didn't like it for a year or two. Then I gave it another chance, and then bam, here I don't even use any of the other social media stuff anymore. I try to put stuff on like a TikTok or something like that or a Snapchat, and I can't figure it out, man. I'm too old for that shit. So I'm mainly just on Twitter. That's pretty much it. All my content's here. I use it almost like a Facebook, Twitter kind of morph. Some of my family stuff, some things I do in my personal life, my fantasy football content, is all here. So you're getting the full John McGlynn experience when you follow John McGlynn here.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, it seems like excuse me, John. Sorry, I was just talking with my co-host here. He was saying he's here with us in the chat here. But it seems like every team in this division is going in different directions and are in different stages as a franchise. The New York Jets feel like a team that is going all in this year. The same can be said about the Dolphins, but their Super Bowl window is wide open. The New England Patriots are starting a new era and just drafted who they hope is their new franchise quarterback and have a new head coach for the first time in 24 years. And then you've got the Buffalo Bills, who are going through a mini reload, however you'd like to say. And some think their Super Bowl window is closed, at least for this year. But when you look at the Buffalo Bills offseason, the Bills lost Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and are moving towards a more run-heavy offense in 2024. when you consider those factors, is Josh Allen's streak of finishing the season as the number one fantasy QB in jeopardy?
Absolutely not. Josh Allen's a stud. He runs the ball. He throws the ball. If he sits in the pocket, he could throw an 80-yard pass on a dime down the field. He could throw the ball to any open receiver anywhere on the field. He's good. He's a good dump-off quarterback. He's a good running quarterback. He's a good red zone quarterback. He can extend plays, getting first downs. I guess here's the thing. I'm in a bunch of leagues, and the scoring is different everywhere. So when you have a scoring system that rewards rushing and quarterbacks and rushing first downs, things like that, those are all points that Josh Allen is going to accumulate on top of all the things he already does passing the ball. Now, he lost Diggs, which that's 130 some targets, something like that Diggs didn't have last year, 100 receptions. That Diggs was kind of an underrated player last year. Yeah, he kind of seemed like fantasy-wise he petered out at the end of the season. But there's still some pretty decent players on this team. So I think Josh Allen definitely is quarterback one, especially when you're in love with Josh Allen, like I used to love Dan Marino. He's always gonna be my number one no matter what. But he's top three as far as scoring concerns. That puts him in tier one, which makes him, if I got to choose any of the top quarterbacks, Josh Allen's my number one.
I hear you, man. We mentioned the loss of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, but the Bills did address the wide receiver position, adding Curtis Samuel in free agency and drafting Keon Coleman. We know Coleman is the Bills receiver you want in Dynasty, but in redraft, are you taking any of the Bills receivers?
I'm taking a receiver named Dalton Kincaid. That's who I'm taking. It doesn't have to be. I guess most leagues right now are tight end premium. I have leagues now. It's a half point. It's half point PPR for wide receivers, a full point for running backs, and 1.5 PPR for tight ends. In that case, you got to think that Keon Coleman's probably going to get 130 targets, 120 targets, and probably 100 receptions, kind of thing like that. I think Curtis Samuel will be right behind him, but I also think Dalton Kincaid will be somewhere in that area. And with a tight end premium in your leagues, if you have that, I would think that the most fantasy points on the team will probably be from Dalton Kincaid himself.
Yeah, I like that answer. Dalton Kincaid's a good one. But, just for the sake of conversation, for the sake of our listeners, outside of Dalton Kincaid, do you like any, of the actual Bills wide receivers in redraft?
I think I do like – I like Keon Coleman. Everybody knows that Khalil Shakir is kind of like he's the dark horse too. He showed flashes at the end of last year. He did really well in the playoff games. That was kind of a necessity because of other players not kind of living up to what they had to do or double covering players, that kind of stuff. I do like Khalil Shakir. And also if you get punt return and kick return yards, Khalil Shakir does both of those things. So it's nice to have a guy like that who gets you yardage for special teams on top of the receptions, on top of the the slot receiver. He extends plays a lot. He breaks a lot of tackles. He's a young guy too. I like Khalil Shakir is kind of my guy on this team who I would if you're going to buy anybody, you don't want to pay the Keon Coleman prices or the Curtis Samuel prices. I'm going to go with Khalil Shakir, who's probably pretty close to the same price as Curtis Samuel is, but you're definitely getting a discount if you're choosing him over Keon Coleman.
Yeah, I hear that. An interesting piece of this Bills offense is James Cook, who we saw have his best season in 2023, but he had his issues with drops and didn't get the goal line work you want from a running back. And Buffalo also drafted Ray Davis this year. Are you buying or selling James Cook in 2024?
You got to buy James Cook. He's the way that he looked like a stud last year. He looked really good. I know there's some fumbles, missed a couple passes, things like that. But the offense flowed through James Cook for a couple weeks. So much where almost everybody else besides Josh Allen and James Cook were fantasy irrelevant on his team for a couple weeks. So if they're gonna, I understand that Ray Davis is someone that people are targeting here, but if you can get James Cook at I wouldn't say early first, but a mid first round pick, or if you're on a draft, if you're in a draft, a startup draft somewhere for redraft, and James Cook is somewhere in the area of players, I would definitely take a stab on him because he's going to catch some passes, man.
Absolutely, yeah, I like James Cook quite a bit. I think he's a little underrated. I will say though, I won't say I'm worried. But with Ray Davis and Ty Johnson and then Josh Allen also kind of taking that goal line work, I do wonder what kind of ceiling he has.
I agree with that. Everybody has a ceiling, that's kind of thing. You got to look at people's floors, and I think James Cook's floor is a little bit more safer than some of the other guys. Not everybody in this division, but he's got a pretty safe floor, which that's what I'm banking on. When you get into people's ceilings, you start wish casting guys that are on your team or or what could happen if he does this, or what happened this and that. I try to look at floors more than I do ceilings. And I like James Cook's floor.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that approach for sure. Another running back in this division that was having a good offseason is Ramondre Stevenson. And we just saw him. He got a 4-year deal and now is being labeled the starting running back. And, we got a little job security with the new contract. But unfortunately, he's on a bit of a bad offense with the New England Patriots. Do you view him as a better redraft or dynasty asset?
Well, with that the NFL says things when they spend money. That's the thing that you could guarantee. If people are paying money, that's why it's about draft capital, because that's where the money goes. If you see somebody's draft capital, you know how much you're getting paid. Everything's tiered system now with paydays. So if they're going to spend the money, especially on a running back, that's you don't really see too many restructured big money running back things. So I was a Ramondre Stevenson guy. As a matter of fact, I traded Ramondre Stevenson. I traded Jared Goff like 2 years ago, straight up in a SuperFlex 12-team SuperFlex draft to get Ramondre Stevenson, thinking that Jared Goff was going to fall off a cliff. And I really kind of talk about some bad trades. I really kind of kicked myself in the arse on that one. But I do like Ramondre Stevenson. I'm a huge Antonio Gibson fan, so I want to put that there first of all. I am the leader of the Antonio Gibson fan club, and I had both of them on a lot of teams. And it really kind of when they drafted both when they free agency Ramondre Stevenson or Antonio Gibson, I was like, you got to be kidding me, man! This is such BS. Now these guys are going to vulture each other because they both do pretty well between the tackles. I mean, Ramondre Stevenson's better between the tackles. Gibson's a way faster dude. They both catch the ball very well, so it's kind of like I was hoping that Antonio Gibson would go somewhere like San Diego or the Chargers or somewhere like that. When he ended up in the Patriots, I was like, no, terrible. So Ramondre Stevenson, I don't think he's underrated at all. I think he's going to get a bulk of the workload just because there's such parity in the offense and the rest of the offense on this team. There's no other fantasy set on this team besides Ramondre Stevenson. We'll get into the rest of the players later, but as far as Ramondre Stevenson's concerned, he's going to be the workhorse on this offense.
I kind of like in best ball, if you can get Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson kind of double tapping running back there, I don't think that's a bad move.
I don't play any best ball. I think that's kind of cheating. So, I mean, there's a lot of best ball people out there. Of course, that's a fantastic move because if Ramondre Stevenson or Antonio Gibson go down, one of those two is going to be just the home run for the rest. I mean, that's a league winner because he'll be doing both of those guys, like I said before, both do pretty much similar things. They'll be doing all the things if one of them goes down.
Absolutely. I mentioned that the Patriots are starting a new era, and we saw them for the first time in years. Well, I shouldn't say years because they did actually draft Mac Jones not that long ago, but they used another early round pick, a top 5 pick, in Drake Maye, hoping that they have their new franchise quarterback. However, early camp reports state that Jacoby Brissett is the starter. If you're in need of a quarterback in SuperFlex, are you risking a top 7 draft pick on Drake Maye this year?
Dynasty or we're talking about redraft? We're talking about Dynasty. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'd much rather take a receiver at this point in time in the draft. There's so many better receivers that I think are more sure things, especially if you're in a win now kind of thing and you got lucky traded up for a pick. I mean, I'm definitely taking League Neighbors. Any of the other receivers in that area where he'd probably go 3 or 4 or 5. I'm not, because especially I think you said Jacoby Brissett is projected to be the starter for at least half this year. I think possibly the full year. They have a really tough schedule to start the year, and they're not going to throw a rookie in there when they're doing crap, getting killed. They're going to let him sit back so they don't scare him to death in the pocket on a crap team with nothing else besides a running game. I'm not going after Drake Maye because I don't think he's I'm not a big fan of him to begin with, and then let alone the situation that they're put him in. I don't even think he's a long-term answer for this team, to be honest with you. I think he's just kind of like, hey, we need a quarterback. We got to do what we got to do. We have Jacoby Brissett. We'll see if we can make Drake Maye into something better than Jacoby Brissett. But, this is I don't even think he's a big a dynasty buy, to be honest with you.
Interesting. The Patriots offense, especially in 2024, not too much to like as far as fantasy goes. But, the Patriots used multiple draft picks to upgrade their wide receiver room. And based on camp reports, Jalen Polk has been the best of the bunch along with Pop Douglas. But Javon Baker looks to be the alpha X receiver. Are any Patriots receivers worth drafting outside of best ball leagues? I know you don't play best ball, but do you find yourself targeting any of these guys?
I'm getting Baker everywhere. That's kind of, I think the Pop Douglas kind of thing was the last year because there was, I mean, he was the only game in town. Look around, it's like that Will Smith thing. It's like, hey, it's Pop Douglas and nobody else, and so he just got so much use. And on top of that, I think he was the leading receiver with like 45 targets or 45 receptions or something like that last year. So I'm not a big Polk fan either. Some people like him. It's okay, but I think the offense is, first of all, it's not a high-powered offense. It's a short area offense. Somebody's going to get some targets, but I'm not expecting anything huge out of any of them. So I'd rather just get Javon Baker in the third round than Javon Polk in the second.
I hear you, man. That's an interesting group for sure. I definitely like Javon Baker as well, just because of what I perceive his role to be, this year and in the future. But it's hard to ignore the reports on Jalen Polk, especially when you think about, the success that slot receivers have had in New England over the years.
Yeah, I get it. That's somebody's gonna have to catch some targets here, man. And everybody's gonna have a floor in this team. I don't. Some people like Polk, some people don't. I'm just kind of I feel like it's a bad landing spot, and I don't think there's really, if Javon Baker's going to be pretty much a similar production than Polk is, then I guess I don't want to spend the money on Polk or there's better players around the area where Polk's getting drafted at than there is where Baker is at. So
I can understand that. A team that's really exciting for fantasy is the Miami Dolphins, and the Dolphins offense looked to be the best in the NFL last year before injuries took their toll. Where would you rank the Dolphins offense in terms of fantasy among all teams in the NFL?
I mean, when they're on fire, they're number one. We saw that last year. The problem is when they're on fire, it's usually versus a real shit team. So it's wow, look at these Dolphins. They're awesome. They're playing somebody who's unprepared, or they have injuries and they smoke people and they're all over the field scoring 7 touchdowns a game and blah blah. And they play somebody normal and they get they freeze. I don't like Tua. If you watch a Dolphins game, boy, I watch every Dolphins game because my kids are fans. Like I said, I'm a fan. I want the Dolphins to do well. I don't want to wish ill upon the Dolphins at all. But Tua, I mean, he's a first read guy, or if the play's designed for Tyreek Hill downfield, they'll block for him. They'll send everybody out, and he'll hit Tyreek Hill, which he's better. I'll give him this much: he's way better last year than he was 2 years ago at hitting Tyreek Hill in stride. 2 years ago, Tyreek Hill was 10 yards past his defenders, and he had to stop, come back, catch the ball, do some kind of circus act to get back to the end zone. He'd make it in. Last year, Tua was hitting Tyreek Hill in stride, which was very, very nice to see. It didn't happen all the time, but it happened enough for the Dolphins to just get ahead in games and just keep blowing people out, throwing them off their game plan. But Tua, when you rat him a little bit, he literally throws like 8 passes in people's face masks right there. Like he doesn't even see the defenders, things like that. That's dangerous. Thank God those guys play defense because they can't catch or they'd be receivers. Or I mean, it's just Tua just is maddening to watch on a Sunday afternoon when you're watching these. When you're watching like Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, not the red zone, when you're just focusing on one team, or even watching replays of the NFL games, Tua is maddening on like in games where the defense is actually doing their job instead of just leaving it being a sieve for all the receivers.
Yeah, well, it seems like you have certain feelings about Tua, the NFL quarterback, but when healthy, Tua has shown he can be an elite fantasy producer, but he's dealt with injuries the last 2 seasons. If he can stay healthy, could Tua be the best fantasy quarterback in this division?
There's some pretty good. I don't think he's ever going to be Josh Allen, so no, he won't be the best quarterback in this division. I don't even. That's not even. Even if Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle both have I don't know. I don't want to say like better seasons than they had last year. Plus, if Jonnu Smith gets going, and even Malik Washington is kind of a sleeper on this team. If all those guys are just running on running on full cylinders, I still don't think he's going to be Josh Allen-ish.
I got you. Yeah, so Miami has arguably the best wide receiver duo in the NFL, and they added Odell Beckham Jr. You mentioned the rookie Washington, and they also added tight end Jonnu Smith to the mix. Are you worried that Tyreek and Waddle might not get the volume that they need to have elite fantasy production?
I think elite players create elite production. I think Jalen Waddle, no matter who they add on his team, Jalen Waddle is Jalen Waddle, and he's a stud. Yeah. So he's going to get his no matter what. I think you can add whoever you want to as a third receiver, as a better tight end. They could add Kyle Pitts on his team, and Jalen Waddle is still going to be a stud.
Oh, I like that, man. I can't imagine Kyle Pitts running with the Dolphins. That'd be insane. Another exciting piece of this Dolphins team is Devon Achane, rookie running back, or second-year running back, and he's been an off-season darling for fantasy gamers. And we saw his game-breaking speed and week-winning ability on display last year. However, he's on the smaller side of running backs. And Miami re-signed Raheem Mostert to a 2-year deal and drafted prolific running back prospect in Jalen Wright. Achane is currently the RB9 in fantasy. Is he someone we should consider as a sell high in Dynasty?
Yeah, absolutely a sell high. Last couple drafts I've had, in-person drafts, I literally ran up to the board when somebody put a sticker up there and grabbed them by their chest. Like, come on, please. What do you want for Jalen Wright right now? What do you want for Jalen Wright? I mean, I understand that he is a home run player, but I mean, he is Raheem Mostert, but whatever, 10, 11, 12 years, he's 11 years younger than Raheem Mostert. So he's that guy. He's faster. He can break some. He's not a really good, really good break tackle breaker, but man, is he fast, and man, does he get to the outside, and he is what I want on this team. Achane is like, I don't want to say Tyreek Hill because Tyreek Hill is a freak because of the fact that he doesn't really get hurt that often. It's Achane is just someone who is, when you have to perform on all cylinders all the time and you work on speed, it's one of those things where when you're a speed guy, nothing can go wrong. If you have any hamstring pull, any kind of ankle injury, any kind of anything, you're shut down kind of thing. And Jalen Wright doesn't need that kind of stuff. He's just a good player too. He's bigger. He can take a little more abuse. So I think I'd take him over. I'm taking Jalen Wright wherever I can and just passing up on Devin Achane. I don't have Achane anywhere. If you were lucky enough to have Achane for a couple games last year where he, if you drafted him late and you got him and he produced for you good, I would have sold him last year. I saw people sell him for 2 first-round picks last year. That was crazy to me. And now I just think that, that was all smoke and mirrors.
So I'm curious, if you had Achane and you were to put him on the block or somebody were to be approaching you as far as trying to trade for him, what would you want in return?
Ooh, man. It depends on at a tight end premium league. I'd be trying to get one of the top 10. I'd be trying for like a Sam Laporta or something like that. Obviously, that's something that would be like, yes, I'll trade him to you right now. Just that's wish casting on my part, like trying to say like here's who I want. I go down the top 2 or 3 like young stud tight ends of Sam Laportas and Trey McBrides, things like that, and then I start looking at guys who I also like at the receiver position. Off the top of my head, I'd probably go after guys like Devonta Smith, things like that. And some people undervalue, but I love Devonta Smith. I think he's a stud. I think he's a great receiver. I don't think I'd buy like, I wouldn't be going after like Keelan Coleman or just things like that. I'd be going more like, let's just say like, I try to put him with a pick to get like Garrett Wilson or something like that, some other guys that are, somewhere in the area, but I don't think that would happen. But I would try to I would do the best I could to just, I'm good at how do you call that? My buddies call it a name for it. I go person by person when I'm trying to sell somebody, and I just go pick and player or pick for your player, pick player for this and that. I go down a list until I get. I send out like 50 trades a day if I want to get rid of somebody. If I'm trying to trade somebody, if I need a position, I'm not afraid to send trades out for guys I want. The problem is I'm in so many leagues and everybody knows who I want now that it's kind of crazy. If you're in redraft, it's a little bit different, but in Dynasty, people catch on real fast who you're trying to trade for. But I guess I would hope for someone like I said, Devonta Smith or something like that. That would be kind of, and that's probably what you're going to get for a guy like Achane. Because I think people are a little bit more skeptical, like me. They have the same skepticism about his future production.
So would you rather have Devon Achane or Drake London?
Drake London. Even though Drake London's like a short catch guy, he's gonna get peppered with a ton of balls. He doesn't go down. His depth of target is not like crazy, but definitely I'll take the receiver over running back 300 times out of 300 times.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I like that, man. So let's move on to the Jets here. We saw what the Jets offense looked like last year without Aaron Rodgers.
Do we have to? Really?
Hey, man, trust me. I didn't want to, but we got to talk about them all, man. You look at Aaron Rodgers' age and coming off a major injury. Is this Jets offense as a whole overvalued, do you think?
No. I like this Jets offense. Breece Hall's an absolute stud. Garrett Wilson's an absolute stud. I think Aaron Rodgers, if he could stay healthy this year, which is huge, he's missing a couple. I don't know if it's contract disputes or some other stuff like that. He's kind of I don't know what he's doing right now. Taking some plays off, taking some days off. I don't know what the story is. There's rumor though going around about Aaron Rodgers. Sometimes when there's smoke, there's fire. But I'm not a big Malachi Corley fan at all. Mike Williams, I mean, you saw him be really – Mike Williams is the kind of player, if you watch him, he goes up for the ball, he jumps in the air, and he doesn't know how to land. He's like the greatest American hero, that show back in the day, like when we were little kids. The guy he could fly, but he had no idea how to land. He hurt himself landing all the time. That's Mike Williams, But I think they stacked themselves up with guys like Braylon Allen and, Isaiah Davis. And, I love Israel Abanikanda, but, I know he's not a stud. But I'm really hoping for my son's teammate in high school, Brother Rice High School in Chicago, Xavier Valade. I'm kind of hoping that he gets a little bit of like he's running back 3 this year. He gets some work. But I think they have a really good system here. And I'm really looking at for big things from Tyler Conklin this year also. I think he's very, very underrated, like to the point where he could be a top 12 tight end.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of people seem to be liking Tyler Conklin right now. I have him stashed on a couple of dynasty rosters, so I'm excited to see what he can do this year. You mentioned Breece Hall, and we saw last year he didn't miss a beat coming back from his injury, and he thrived despite poor quarterback play and a bad offensive line. But as the RB2, Hall is being drafted at his ceiling. Are you drafting Breece Hall at his current price?
Yes. There's no questions asked. I am not a running back guy, like I stated before, but there's some guys who are just special. Some guys who could do everything. Some guys who could break tackles. Some guys who can catch. Some guys who could block. Some guys who could do. Breece Hall is one of he's one of those guys that you just have to pay for. If you don't have him, it's going to hurt. If you want the good stuff, you got to pay the good price. You want to dance, you got to pay the band, is what people say. That's Breece Hall is one of those guys you can't cheap out on and pass up if you have the opportunity to get.
Yeah, I like the confidence there. I'm not really sure if I would, if I'm comfortable paying for him at that price just because of the injury. And it looks like, every year they keep trying to bring in other guys to kind of reduce the workload. So, maybe he has a bit of a cap ceiling, not just because of that, but also when you think about, what we don't know really what to expect from Aaron Rodgers at his age and in this Jets offense.
Well, let's just put it this way, okay? Let's just say you had three stud receivers. You're a typical start 10 lineup, okay?
Yeah.
You had 2 good quarterbacks. You had 3 stud receivers. You got a great tight end. You got 2 good flex players. Some decent guys on your offense. But you're kind of a little bit. You're going for it right now. You're in the championship mode. There's a small. Everybody knows there's a small window when you're on top to win championships. And if you win the championship, you essentially get 8 years paid for. When you collect the money at the end of the year, if you're in a 12-team league, you pay 8% of the pot to join the league. You win 75% of the pot to win the league. You're playing for free for the next 7 years, and the 8 year complete, considering you get your money back for yours. Is Breece Hall, what is he not worth that's worth 8 years of free fantasy football?
I've never thought about fantasy that way. That's an interesting way to think about it.
That's the way I think about everything. I had a buddy of mine a long time ago. He got in a handful of leagues, and this was when I first started. I'm like, I got 2 leagues, and it drove me batty. I couldn't even do a lineup, so it was killing me, blah, blah. And he goes, hey, man, every one of these is a money-making opportunity. That's how you look at this. Not like, because you can't get pissed off if you need 101 yard, if you need a 100-yard bonus, but no touchdown from this guy, or 99 yards and 3 touchdowns from that guy. And you're watching TV and you're looking at both lineups. You're like, it doesn't. After a while, you're in so many leagues, you don't care anymore about what guys do. You just need to. You need to win. You just need to win a championship in leagues. That's the goal of it all. Not that I lose league 6 because this guy scored. In one league he scored 3 touchdowns in one league, and I was playing against him, but he scored 3 touchdowns. But I had him in 2 other leagues. That's just going to happen when you're in 100 leagues. It doesn't matter. It is what it is. So you just have to go after the best players and just pay what it is. Just pay the money to win the league and win that league. Because that one league could be your highest money league, and it could pay for all your leagues combined just for winning that 1 year.
Very, very true, man. Yeah, I like that thought process for sure. A big part of this Jets offense is Garrett Wilson, who is somebody I'm sure a lot of people are going all in for this year. He's the undoubted alpha wide receiver on the Jets, but he suffered from poor quarterback play, and he's had back-to-back wide receiver 2 finishes, but is the wide receiver 7 off the board this year. What are you doing with Garrett Wilson in fantasy?
No, I'm trying to get him everywhere, but he's just people who have him like him, and they know that he's good, and he's still young, and he's a stud. He's from Ohio State. A lot of things going on there that just it's just Stream's breakout for the next 5 or 6 years. He's with no quarterback whatsoever. He's wide receiver 2. What's going to happen when he gets a guy like Aaron Rodgers, a possible healthy Aaron Rodgers? peppering him with the ball. Because we know Rodgers likes one guy. What happens if Rodgers is healthy and he's nailing Garrett Wilson for 160 targets and 110 catches this year? I mean, what happens then? You're like, I didn't want to spend from 204 instead of 107. I passed on Garrett Wilson because I was being cheap with my future draft picks. You got to go after Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, I actually had Garrett Wilson on one SuperFlex Dynasty team, and I ended up trading him for Brock Purdy, where I was looking to upgrade at quarterback. Brock Purdy and Jahan Dotson, actually.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah, not mad about that trade.
I just traded for Jahan Dotson for in a different league. I traded away Noah Fant to get Jahan Dotson, and it's a 1.5. It's a 1 point premium at tight ends, and Noah Fant's kind of a popular name right now. But I think Jahan Dotson is an underrated wide receiver. So it's funny you said that.
Yeah, I've been trying to I've been drafting Jahan Dotson everywhere in best ball, and I've traded for him in a couple of spots. I think he's due for a bounce back year.
Yes, agreed.
You talked earlier about the Jets wide receivers. Mike Williams, Xavier Gibson, Malachi Corley, who it sounds like you don't really care for. But when you look at that group of wide receiver twos on the Jets, are any of these guys worth drafting in redraft leagues for you?
I mean, I would probably take a chance on Mike Williams over Malachi Corley, to be honest with you, just because Corley's. There's so many people who have rookie fever. Malachi Corley got drafted. He's gonna, he's a new heir apparent. I know Mike Williams is good. He's getting older. He's coming off an injury, but I'd probably still take a chance over a proven receiver that has done things in the past, not great things, but good things, over a guy like Malachi Corley in an offense where we know that quarterback hates rookies. So I'm going to take Mike Williams over probably outside of Garrett Wilson.
I have trust issues, man. And Mike Williams, he's never really burned me. But at the same time, it just seems like he's the player when you need him most, he always fails. And like when you don't need him, he goes off. So he's like one of those players I never really draft.
If you play fantasy enough, that's going to happen to a lot of guys you like. It is what it is. It's one of those things where you pass up on so many opportunities by being like salty with some people, and it's like, this guy did this to me, kind of stuck it up my ass in the past, you lose offense. How many times I got burned by had that kind of that how do you call it, that thought process. It's like, man, why wouldn't I just shut my mouth and just pay to get him where I could have had him at this price? So I don't do that anymore. It's I just look at value and stuff like that, and just go get the guys that are going to win you the championships. It's a whole team. The whole boat's got to row together, or else it doesn't. It's going to turn right or turn left if everybody's not rowing. The same strokes, the same everything. So go with the guys who've been there before, who showed some things, who are probably going to do pretty decent things with a good quarterback who knows how to get in the ball, especially a big dude like Mike Williams. Yeah,
very true, very true. Well, John, I know you play in a lot of fantasy leagues, but if you were to pick one player from the AFC East to have on all of your fantasy teams, who would you pick regardless of format?
Any player at all, or any player at a certain position, or anything?
No, any player at all.
Oh, it's Josh Allen. Like that's like I don't want to cheat and say Josh Allen, but I'm going to say Josh Allen. So I'm going to do a second here, just because that was kind of an obvious question, obvious answer. I don't want to just be like, okay, I'm probably going to go with let's say somebody like, I'm going to say Dalton Kincaid, because I just think that he's like, a lot of people have him as a I don't want to say underrated asset, but I think the new shiny toys in Keon Coleman on the team, and the thought process for Khalil Shakir and James Cook leaves Dalton Kincaid kind of in the dust a little bit, and I think he's probably going to be number one receiver on this team this year. And if you already have Josh Allen, to have Dalton Kincaid as that stack, I mean, that's fantasy gold.
Absolutely. Yeah, my guy I'm going to go with Tua Tagovialoa. He was QB9 in 2023, but he's being drafted as a QB16 in 2024. And SuperFlex, I feel like that's a pretty big discount. I'll take that all day. I think Tua is definitely underrated. I know you're not a big fan of his.
I think the floor quarterback 16 is pretty. I think it's a little low myself, even though a little low. Not going to go crazy and say it's super low, but I think he's probably like quarterback, 12, something like that. Fringe quarterback 1, low quarterback 2 kind of thing. 16 is getting a little bit to where those guys that are quarterback like 12 to 17, 12 to 18, they're all in like the same bucket anyway. I'm going to go as far as saying like quarterback 10 to quarterback 18 are on the same bucket. And if I'm looking at that group of players, I'd probably, just for fantasy wise, I just, that's the kind of thing that we just talked about a minute ago. I know how much Tua pisses me off, but I also understand what fantasy value is.
Absolutely. Who's your favorite sleeper from this division?
My favorite sleeper from this division would be, I'm going to go with Jalen Wright. I think I talked about it before a little while ago. I think if something was to happen, I think A-Chain is just kind of, he's overrated. They need someone to, especially on plays on things. If something was to happen to A-Chain where he was hurt, I'm not sure Mostert will be the guy to get 18 touchdowns again this year. I think they're going to try and they got Wright for a reason. I think it's a security blanket, but they're going to work him into a lot of games if they're winning big. And Wright is a home run hitter. He's a guy that you can get the ball on some kind of sweep or a little screen pass, and that dude could just fly it on the field, man. Jalen Wright is probably my biggest sleeper in this division.
I like that. For me, I'm going to go with Xavier Gibson. I know he's been getting hyped up because of positive minicamp reports, but when you look at the wide receivers in New York outside of Garrett Wilson, I think Gibson is in a prime position to get snaps, and even if the receivers ahead of him don't get injured, I like his skill set. I think he could be a good weapon for Aaron Rodgers.
I get that, but they run the ball a lot. They have they got Garrett Wilson, they got Corley, and they got Mike Williams already at the wide receiver position. Like I said, Conklin's gonna get a lot of targets too, and I think if anything, like Alan Lazard will probably get his, because he's right. Aaron Rodgers requesting to be on the team. There's just a couple guys on this team I think who might make a little bit. The only thing that makes if you're in a league that has special teams, I think Gibson's more of a special teamer than an actual player on this team. I think that's why the Jets came around, because he's a kick returner and a punt returner. When you play special teams, they're going to keep you on the field. So I could see Gibson having somewhat, but I honestly believe that he's more of, they don't want to get into starters hurt, so they have him on a special teams role. But you never know. He could, if something was to happen, like we said about before, about Mike Williams getting hurt again and Malachi Corley's not panning out, then if Lazard is, again, something happens, a couple injuries can happen to anything. And Gibson is on the team. He's not going anywhere because special teams players are worth their weight in gold to some of these coaches. They're going to keep a roster spot. That's a good, mine wasn't necessarily so much of a sleeper that it was, that's a sleeper. That's definitely an old school sleeper. So if Gibson was to, I'll be the first to call you out and say, man, he picked Xavier Gibson as the sleeper. So absolutely.
I appreciate that, John. Thank you. For every sleeper, there's always a bust, John. Which player do you think will be a bust in this division?
Is it fair to say like a guy like Demario Douglas? Because I think a lot of people have him pretty high, and I think last year he was one of the leaders on receptions on this team. But I just feel like he was the only game in town. I see people trading for him still now, even though they drafted Jalen Polk and they got Gibson catching passes and they drafted Baker and they got Hunter Henry on the team and Jaheim Bell and they got Kendrick Bourne. I just think that I see Demario Douglas getting drafted on so many teams still or getting traded for, and I think he's just going to be fantasy irrelevant this year.
That's fair. My bust, this is simply based on his ADP, but I think Breece Hall is going to fail to live up to that RB2 price tag that he currently has. So Breece Hall is my bust for this division.
That's I just feel like he's going to have such a workload. What do you consider a bust? Like him not living up to last year's stats, or not not?
I'll say like people are drafting him as the RB2 off the board, and he finishes as like RB12 or RB15, something like that.
Yeah, price factor is a lot into being a bust. Yeah, how much you paid for it and what he put out, but RB1 to RB7 or 8 is pretty close to each other, that kind of stuff. So if he's 12 and he falls into like tier 3, which is still and bottom of running back 1, top of running back 2, I guess I'd be disappointed as far as that goes. It's hard for running backs to just keep going and getting these monster seasons, but I think he's the only game in town there, man. I think that he's going to get, minus an injury, I don't think he's going to be outside the top 5, 6, 7. But if he was running back 12, I wouldn't be super disappointed, but I'd be a little bit pissed. But if he went down like running back like 20 or something like that, I'd be livid for what I paid for him. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and you look at his season last year, he had I believe 75 receptions. I wouldn't be surprised if those came down, and obviously less receptions is less points. So I could see him having a bit of a worse season statistically as a receiver than maybe people are starting to think. I think that's kind of what's driving that price up.
I'm a huge Braylon Allen fan, so I'm hoping that Breece Hall doesn't. I don't have any Breece Hall. I can't afford him. I never drafted him anywhere because I always pick quarterbacks or wide receivers my first 3 or 4 rounds. I don't want to call it a zero RB guy, but running backs are the easiest people to replace. So I got Braylon Allen in a lot of leagues that are pretty late, and even some drafts I don't have him yet. I'm going to keep trying to trade for him, but man, that's tough.
What? Who was your favorite rookie to draft in this division?
Let's see. I'm going to say probably Javon Baker was probably my number one. It's either Jalen Wright or Javon Baker. I'm going to say those are probably my favorite rookies in this division. Anyway, I got Keon Coleman in a bunch of places, but I don't love him. I like Ray Davis from Buffalo. In a couple, I like him as far as just a between the tackles kind of grinder kind of dude. But I think that it's either Wright or Javon Baker. I think so. That I'm gonna have to go with one of those two. It's a toss up. I like both of them a lot, so I don't want to. Baker's probably not going to produce as much, so I'm going to go with Jalen Wright.
Yeah, that's my guy too, Jalen Wright, regardless of format, but especially in best ball, you want any and every piece of this Miami Dolphins offense.
Truth.
All right, here we are with Fantasy Edge, and here, John, you'll share maybe an account, a website, a podcast, or other resource you like and use that you feel gives you an edge in fantasy.
You know what? I work construction all the time, so I have earbuds in. I subscribe to 50 different podcasts. I'm a listener.
Oh, yeah.
I just burn through podcasts at 1.5 speed on the way to work. I don't listen to music at all. First of all, I can't stand today's music to begin with, and I never was, even back in the day. I like Guns N' Roses. I like Metallica. I like those kind of bands, back in the day. But I can only listen to that stuff so many times before it gets like, this is just, it's infuriating now. It's just, my kids started singing it, and they sound like a bunch of cats, getting the tail getting pulled, singing it. And it's like, But I just burn through podcasts all the time. There's so many good analysts out there to listen to. But as far as I don't really. There's no sites, I guess, that I go with or anything like that because I don't have access to a computer all the time. I'm in construction, I have my phone a lot, so it's mostly in my pocket with earbuds in. So I'm not a big computer person. I'm lucky I can log on to StreamYard half the time. That's how computer illiterate I am, But as far as my host, Justin Taylor, is probably, like I said, I think before the pre-show we talked about this. He is in everything. He does redraft. He writes for DLF for IDP stuff. He does rankings for IDP. He does Campus Canton leagues. He does IDP stuff. He could tell you the backup linebacker for the Penn State Nittany Lions that plays in the outside linebacker and, rank how many tackles he thinks he's going to have. Like he does. He knows who's coming up. He knows who's here. He knows how to trade. He knows he's great at everything in fantasy football. He's probably one of the smartest guys. One of the hardest working guys, Nick Script, my neighbor, another good friend of mine, home league homie, just like JT is. Guys like that. If you look at P2W Fantasy, Nick Script, every day in the morning, he's on every social media site putting something out. If the sun's going to rise, Nick Script's putting content out. He's such a good hard worker, such a great analyst. His stuff's not just like, hey, this guy might have 10 receptions today, something like that. The stuff he puts out every day, it's absolutely amazing. So as far as the hardest worker and the most knowledgeable people, those two are my favorite follow. Those would be my two recommended follows for anybody in the industry.
Like it. Give us a fantasy shout out. Maybe here, share an account you think would be a good guest for the show.
Yeah, I probably messed up that question there, but it was those. If you can get JT Orange on here to talk about anything, or if you can get Nick Script on here to talk about anything, if you can get Pat Fitzmaurice, a guy like that who's just he'll just make you laugh the entire show. There's Nate Powell. There's so many good people in this industry. I work with Fantasy and Frames, and I work with Fantrax, which is Nick Scripts, and P2W is Fantasy and Frames is Jorge Edwards. If you can get Jorge Edwards to come on here and talk about Fantasy and Frames and how good, how many awesome people are on that site. Fantasy and Frames, it feels like a family. I've been with probably 10 or 12 different places that kind of, didn't didn't feel right, or they didn't do things right, or they didn't, it wasn't kind of what I felt like. I never really felt like a family before, like I do with Fantasy and Frames. It's a great, the people, everybody on there is just awesome people. So Jorge Edwards from Fantasy and Frames is my kind of my recommendation to have on the show, or next guest if you get a chance to get him.
Yeah, I love that, man. All right, John, give us a bold call AFC East edition.
Bold call AFC East edition. I'm going to say the three teams from the AFC East all make the playoffs. Everybody except for the Patriots.
I like that. yeah. I think that's a pretty safe call there as far as the Patriots go. For me, I had I think the Dolphins. The Dolphins running backs will score a combined 40 touchdowns in 2023.
Dolphins combined will score 40 touchdowns?
No, the Dolphins running backs will score combined 40 touchdowns.
Man, that's pretty bold, brother. That's a good one.
Well, I mean, Mostert had 21 by himself last year, and I believe Achane had 8 or 9.
Yeah, he had like 5 in one game though. So that was kind of cheating. If you have 2 games with 5 touchdowns apiece, that's a little nuts. But 40 touchdowns, that's I don't see the Dolphins. I see a lot of running plays out of them, but 40 touchdowns, man, that's pretty wild. I mean, I guess there's a place in the world where it's not a terrible call, but it's a little bit out of it kind of threw me off guard there. So that's a good one.
And a universe is going to happen somewhere, John, right?
Yes, it will, but not with the Dolphins, I don't think.
And last but not least, John, here we are with Plug Talk, and here you'll share any and all content you're creating and where we can find it, my friend.
I run a site. I just started a YouTube channel. If you can follow me, that would be great. At YouTube, it's Dynasty Evaluation, and I try to, anywhere I'm at, I try to include my YouTube channel in there to like put all my content on the one channel, because I'm not really good with the computer, like I said before. I wish I would have done a little bit earlier. I'm on the next show 135 now, or 137, or something like that. I like to plug my own, like, I put my podcast out every week. I do this stuff when I get a chance. I'm not an analyst. I have a wife. I got 4 kids. I got 3 dogs. I got a crazy work schedule. I got all stuff going on. I coach sports my whole life. I finally get a chance to do this fantasy football stuff for, I do it for free now. I don't get paid from anybody. I volunteer, and I donate my time just to make this space better for the next guy, I guess, that kind of stuff. But, if you want to, I like to plug Dynasty Evaluation. It's on all the podcast stuff, all the iTunes and Spotify and all that kind of stuff. You can subscribe to that if you missed the shows, or if you can watch them on YouTube, that'd be great too. If you got time for the YouTube channel, I understand everybody's busy and they can only watch so many shows, but if you're on the way to work, throw on the YouTube Commissioner Evaluation. Try to keep them like, half hour to 45 minutes to an hour show. Some of them go like an hour and a half. Some go 2 hours. It all depends on who the guest is. I always tell the guest all the time, hey, this show's going to, it's going to be an hour show, right? I'm like, I'll try to make it an hour show. It's up to you, because I'll ask you questions. And if you ramble for hours about every question, I'm going to ask every question. If it ends up being an hour and a half show, I don't care. If I'm going to do a show like tonight, I don't know if you had a time limit or what your expected time limit was. I was going to talk until you didn't have nothing else to talk about, no matter what, because this is what it's all about. Us helping each other out, and get content out, and just, pick each other's brains about good stuff. And I just want to say thank you very much for having me on the show. It means a lot when people ask me to come on their shows, and I really appreciate being here with guys like you.
Well, no, John, we were talking pre-roll, man, and you were just talking about, your crazy schedule in life, man. So, thank you for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing your time. You were excellent. I can't thank you enough for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it. John McGlynn 75 on the X Machine. Find me there, and thanks again.
Yes, sir. And guys, I'm Paul Ryan. You can find me on X at Paul_Ryan15. We appreciate you joining us, and I will see you guys next week.